The Yalta Riddle. Roosevelt shook hands with Stalin in a palace on the Black Sea, and within weeks, Eastern Europe began slipping behind a different kind of front line. Not barbed wire yet. Not walls. Just agreements, percentages, and armies that didn't go home. The haunting question is simple: why did Franklin D. Roosevelt trust Joseph Stalin at Yalta when so many signs suggested he shouldn't? But then something even stranger happened. The deal that was supposed to guarantee free elections became, in practice, a timetable for control. At Yalta in February 1945, the Allies faced a brutal reality. Nazi Germany was collapsing, but the peace could collapse too. Roosevelt needed Stalin's Red Army to finish the war in Europe fast, to reduce American casualties, and, crucially, to help end the war against Japan. Stalin needed recognition of Soviet security demands and political space to shape Eastern Europe. The central riddle: was Yalta a diplomatic betrayal, a necessary compromise, or the only agreement possible when one side already occupied the ground? The map was already moving. By early 1945, the war's geography made the diplomacy lopsided. The Red Army had blasted west after Operation Bagration and was now deep in Poland, pressing toward Germany. In the west, Eisenhower's armies were still fighting through the Ardennes aftermath and preparing to cross the Rhine. In other words, the most decisive vote in Eastern Europe was not taken in a conference room, it was taken by who had divisions where. Roosevelt was also fighting time at home. He was visibly ill, exhausted by years of war leadership. The U.S. public wanted victory, demobilization, and a stable post-war order. Another fear hung over Washington: if the alliance fractured before Germany surrendered, the final months of the war could become even bloodier, or politically chaotic. So Yalta wasn't merely a summit. It was a race to lock down a peace framework before the battlefield wrote its own. Hello, listener, let me know where you're watching from. And if you don't mind subscribing to the channel and giving it a like, I'd be very pleased as the author. Enjoy listening. 3 leaders, 3 different wars. Yalta was one table, but 3 separate strategic obsessions. Roosevelt, he wanted a post-war system, what would become the United Nations, capable of preventing another global catastrophe. He also wanted Soviet entry into the war against Japan to shorten the Pacific War. One interpretation is that Roosevelt believed personal diplomacy could soften Stalin's behavior, or at least channel it into rules. Churchill, he feared exactly what was happening: a Soviet-dominated Eastern Europe. Churchill's nightmare was Britain winning the war and losing the continent. He pushed for influence arrangements and safeguards, but Britain's leverage was shrinking with its manpower limits and war exhaustion. Stalin, he wanted a security belt. Twice in 30 years, invasions had come through Eastern Europe. Stalin also wanted ideological and political control, friendly regimes, compliant governments, and strategic depth. He negotiated like a man whose army was already holding the cards. This is the heart of it: Roosevelt bargained for promises, Stalin bargained from positions. The bargain before the bargain. Yalta did not begin at Yalta. It was built on earlier meetings and signals: Tehran in 1943, wartime correspondence, and the steady Soviet push west. The key issue was Poland. Poland had been invaded in 1939, Britain went to war over it, and now Poland's future would define whether the Allies stood for something more than victory. There were already 2 competing Polish political centers: the London-based government in exile and the Soviet-backed Lublin Committee. Stalin's forces occupied Poland, and Soviet security services were already shaping political realities on the ground. Roosevelt and Churchill needed a formula that could be presented as legitimate: a government broadened to include democratic leaders and followed by free elections. The language sounded strong. The enforcement mechanism was weak. A document that is still being debated is the real meaning of free elections in Stalin's understanding versus Roosevelt's. Some historians argue the phrase was knowingly ambiguous, designed to keep the alliance together until Germany was finished. The decision point: why Roosevelt chose trust. So why did Roosevelt trust Stalin enough to sign onto terms that later looked hollow? 1. The Japan factor. Roosevelt wanted Soviet entry against Japan. The U.S. was preparing for a potential invasion of the Japanese home islands, an operation many planners expected would cost staggering casualties. Getting the USSR to attack Japan and Manchuria could shorten the war and weaken Japanese resistance. At Yalta, Stalin agreed to enter the war against Japan roughly 3 months after Germany's defeat, in exchange for territorial and strategic concessions in the Far East. Roosevelt judged that deal worth it. 2. The UN vision. Roosevelt's long game was a functioning international order. He needed Stalin inside the tent. One interpretation is that Roosevelt believed the UN framework, especially a Security Council with veto power, was the price for Soviet participation and post-war stability. 3. Occupation reality. Even if Roosevelt distrusted Stalin completely, what was the enforcement tool? In February 1945, the Western Allies were not in Warsaw, Bucharest, or Sofia. The Red Army was. Roosevelt could threaten diplomatic consequences, but Stalin could simply point at the map. 4. Coalition management. Roosevelt also had to keep the Grand Alliance intact until Germany surrendered. A public rupture might destabilize coordination, supply arrangements, and war planning. So Roosevelt's trust was not purely personal naivety. It was also a calculated gamble under constraints, a wager that written commitments and post-war institutions could restrain Soviet behavior more than immediate confrontation could. Immediate consequences: the promise meets the ground. Yalta produced agreements on Germany's occupation zones, reparations concepts, the UN framework, Poland's political restructuring and elections, Soviet entry against Japan. On paper, it looked like structure. On the ground, it looked like momentum. As Soviet forces advanced, friendly governments emerged across Eastern Europe, often through coalitions at first, then through tightened control, security services, control of media, manipulation of election rules, intimidation of opponents. The true cost of this decision was horrific, not because Yalta caused every arrest or crackdown, but because it failed to prevent the consolidation of one-party rule in many places where pluralism had been promised. Western diplomats sent increasingly alarmed reports. The language from Yalta became a battleground. The West pointed to free elections, Moscow pointed to security, anti-fascism, and popular democracy, terms that could mean almost anything under Soviet supervision. The fallout: Poland, reputation, and the Cold Peace. Poland became the symbol of Yalta's limits. Opposition figures were harassed, arrested, or sidelined. The London Poles were outmaneuvered. Elections, where held, were heavily managed. Historians disagree on how early Roosevelt understood the depth of Stalin's intentions, but the trend became hard to deny. In the United States, Yalta later turned into a political weapon, used to accuse Roosevelt and his advisors of giving away Eastern Europe. That framing sometimes oversimplified the military reality, but it captured a public sense of betrayal. Internationally, the alliance's trust dissolved rapidly. By 1946, Churchill's Iron Curtain speech crystallized what many already felt. And yet there's a grim twist. Stalin did enter the war against Japan, smashing the Guandong Army in Manchuria in August 1945, just as promised. That success made the Yalta bargain look, in one dimension, strategically validated, even as it helped set the terms of Soviet influence in Asia too. The alternatives: what could Roosevelt have done? Could Roosevelt have gotten a better deal? Alternative 1: hard confrontation at Yalta. Roosevelt could have refused to sign vague language, demanded stronger monitoring, or threatened consequences. But with Soviet armies occupying the region, Stalin might simply have said no and proceeded anyway, leaving the West with no agreement and no leverage. Alternative 2: race the Red Army. Some argue the Western Allies could have pushed harder into Central Europe earlier. But operational reality, logistics, the Battle of the Bulge aftermath, and German resistance made a dramatic dash to Warsaw unrealistic. Also, Allied strategy prioritized defeating Germany efficiently, not initiating a de facto race for occupation zones beyond agreed lines. Alternative 3: delay recognition, use economic leverage. The U.S. could have tried to use post-war aid, loans, or reconstruction support as leverage. But Stalin's system was prepared to endure hardship for strategic control, and Soviet security priorities often outweighed economic incentives. So the uncomfortable conclusion, Roosevelt's menu of options was narrower than later critics admitted. That doesn't mean Yalta was inevitable, it means the costs of resisting were real and uncertain. Myths, memos, and the debate over trust. A major myth is that Yalta handed Eastern Europe to Stalin like a gift. In many places, Stalin already held the decisive advantage, occupation. Another myth is that Roosevelt was simply fooled. Some advisors were skeptical, and Roosevelt himself made remarks, often paraphrased in accounts, suggesting he believed Stalin could be managed by incentives and prestige, kept cooperative through partnership rather than confrontation. The problem wasn't a lack of intelligence, it was a mismatch of goals. A document still being debated is the meaning and enforceability of the Declaration on Liberated Europe. Was it a sincere blueprint? Or a diplomatic cover to keep the alliance intact until Germany fell? Historians also dispute how much Roosevelt's health affected his performance. He was clearly weakened. Whether that changed outcomes is unknowable, but it likely reduced his ability to grind through details and pressure tactics the way a healthier leader might have. And there's the hardest point, Stalin could sign words and control realities. Western leaders had signatures, Stalin had security services, party cadres, and armies. Conclusion, the gamble that shaped the post-war world. Return to the riddle, why did Roosevelt trust Stalin at Yalta? Because Roosevelt believed, under wartime pressure, that an agreement with Stalin was better than no agreement, that Soviet help against Japan would save lives, that the UN could anchor a stable peace, and that written commitments might restrain Soviet behavior. He also faced the simplest, most brutal fact, Stalin's armies were already in Eastern Europe. But then something even stranger happened, the conference that was supposed to end the war's divisions became the preface to new ones. Yalta didn't start the Cold War by itself, but it set expectations, and exposed how little paper could do against power. The final lesson is not that diplomacy is pointless. It's that diplomacy without leverage becomes prophecy. Roosevelt made a wager with history, and the bill came due in borders, governments, and generations who discovered that liberation could be followed by a different kind of occupation.